In this section, we'll look at American foreign policy during the 1920s. Now, many people have said American foreign policy in the 1920s was mainly neo-isolationist, and you can see this in the sense that the Republicans raised the tariff and they rejected the League of Nations, they reduced the size of the military, but it really isn't as isolationist as you might expect when you look a little closer. Certainly, they opposed Wilson's League and cut the military and all of that, but they did have participants, unofficial observers at the League of Nations, and America did partake in some discussions about restricting the opium traffic around the world. We were involved in some tariff discussions. We had unofficial observers at the World Court in Geneva. The government also was involved. You can see it by their encouragement of banks to form consortiums, sort of groups of bankers, to funnel capital, to funnel money to foreign countries who need it. The government's telling American bankers to loan money for American businesses to purchase rubber plantations, say in the East Indies, or oil wells in the new country of Iraq. It's may not be the military getting imperialism spreading, but it's certainly American economic interests are still abroad. During the war, World War I, the United States had become a major creditor nation. It had loaned a lot of money to a lot of different countries. And the United States had to organize those debts and figure out how it's going to be repaid. Congress created the Foreign Debt Commission to negotiate with with various countries, depending on their ability to pay. It eventually totaled the debt owed to the United States at $10.3 billion and set up a system of rates and payments with different countries that would go on for, supposedly over 62 years. Britain and France were the biggest debtors, and they were really demanding heavy reparation payments from Germany, $33 billion, which is what they demanded. And I'd mentioned this in regard to the Treaty of Versailles in the World War I topic. Britain and France were pressing Germany to pay reparation payments because they owed the United States considerable money. The problem was Germany didn't have the money to pay the reparations. And in fact, Germany defaulted on the reparation payments in 1924. This provoked a crisis and led one United States banker, Charles Dawes, to propose a system that would benefit everybody. This became known as the Dawes Plan. And under this system, the United States would allow private bankers to loan money to the defeated country of Germany, the government of Germany. That would allow Germany to rebuild and to pay its reparation payments to Britain and France, which would, in turn, allow Britain and France able to pay back the United States. It was work in everybody's favor in that way. This worked for several years until 1929, and even then Germany was having trouble payment. So they under the so-called Young Plan, they even lowered the payments even less that Germany owed. But in general, the Dawes Plan and its revision as the Young Plan did help the countries rebuild after World War I. When you think of foreign policy in the 1920s, you tend to think of America sort of not signing many treaties and just not getting involved. But we did host the Washington Naval Conference in 1921 and 1922, which was pretty significant. The Republicans did not want to join the League of Nations, but they did reluctantly agree to take part in the conference. There was an arms race building in the Far East, and even many isolationists worried about the buildup of these armaments. The United States was represented by Secretary of State Charles Evans Hughes. Harding had initially opposed the conference, but when he was convinced that the United States should go, he decided to give the conference some teeth. The Washington Conference ultimately produced several treaties. The Four-Power Treaty with the United States, Great Britain, France, and Japan, they agreed to settle any disputes over the Pacific Far East peacefully at conventions, and obviously this would break down before World War II. The Five-Power Treaty basically the same countries as the four-power treaty, United States, Britain, Japan, and France, and also Italy, agreed to limit the tonnage of new battleships constructed at the ratio of 5, 5, 3, 1.6, 1.6. That is, the Britain and the United States at 5. We have Japan at 3, and France and Italy at basically 1.5. So at that ratio, America was guaranteed a stronger navy. The nine-power treaty, the same countries in the five-power treaty, along with Belgium, Holland, Portugal, and China, they all agreed to maintain open-door policy and trade with China and otherwise respect China's sovereignty. Later in the 1920s, there were attempts at additional arms limitation talks, for example, in the London Naval Conference of 1930, but they generally fell apart. Most notably, there was the Kellogg-Briand Pact signed in Paris in 1928. Kellogg was the American representative and Briand was the French representative. This pact almost laughingly renounced war as an instrument of national policy, and it was actually agreed to by 47 countries of the world. Of course, there was no enforcement mechanism. How can you enforce a pact against war without going to war yourself? When it came to Latin America, in the 1920s, America still kind of saw the Roosevelt corollary of the Monroe Doctrine in force, at least in the sense of the right of Americans to use force to ensure stability. And you can even see this especially in the Dominican Republic, where Americans virtually controlled that country's finances. There were also concerns with Mexican natural resources, special oil problems. Mexico wanted the rights to the oil itself. After lengthy arguments with the United States, we kind of reached a compromise with Mexico. This concludes the section on foreign policy in the 1920s.